Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Continuing, this is Stave 2, the first of the three spirits. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment, and also check out the first part of Stave 1. Here we go, Stave 2, the first of the three spirits. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. So he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7, and from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12, then stopped. 12. It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong. An icicle must have got into the works. 12. He touched the spring of his repeater to correct the most preposterous clock. Its rapid little pulse beat 12, and stopped. Why? It is impossible, said Scrooge, that I can have slept through a whole day and fought into another night. It is impossible that anything has happened to the sun, and that this is 12 at noon. The idea being an alarming one, he scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. He was obliged to rub the frost off with the sleeve of his dressing gown before he could see anything, and could he see very little then? And could see very little then. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold, and that there was no noise of people running to and fro and making a great stir, as there unquestionably would have been if night had beaten off bright day and taken possession of the world. This was a great relief, because 3 days after sight of this first of exchange paid to Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge, or his order, and so forth, would have become a mere United States security if there were no delays, if there were no days to count by. Scrooge went to bed again, and thought and thought and thought it over and over and over, and could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed he was, and the more he endeavored not to think, the more he thought. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Every time he resolved within himself, after as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same as if its hold were of uncommon strength. Its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were like those upper members, bare. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round his waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a branch of fresh green holly in his hand, and in singular contradiction of that wintry emblem, had his dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using in its duller moments a great extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under his arm. Even this, though when Scrooge looked at it with increasing steadiness, was not its strangest quality, for as his belt sparkled and glittered now in one part and now in another, and what was light one instant at another time was dark, so the figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, being now a thing with one arm, now with one leg, now with 20 legs, now a pair of legs without a head, now a head without a body, of which dissolving parts no outline would be visible in the dense gloom wherein they melted away, and in the very wonder of this it would be itself again, distinct and clear as ever. Are you a spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me? Asked Scrooge. I am. The voice was soft and gentle, singularly low, as if instead of being so close beside him, the end of the Christmas. Scrooge's former self grew larger at the words, and the room became a little darker and more dirty. The panels shrunk, the windows cracked, fragments of plaster fell out of the ceiling, and the naked laths were shown instead. But how all this was brought about, Scrooge knew no more than you do. He only knew that it was quite correct, that everything had happened. So, then there he was alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays. He was not reading now, but walking up and down despairingly. Despairingly, Scrooge looked at the ghost, and with a mournful shaking of his head, glanced anxiously towards the door. It opened, and a little girl much younger than the boy came, darting in and putting her arms around his neck, and often kissing him, addressed him as her dear, dear brother. "I have come to bring you home, dear brother," said the child, clapping her tiny hands and bending down to laugh. "To bring you home, home, home." "Home, little fan," returned the boy. "Yes," said the child, brimful of glee. "Home for good and more, home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That's home like heaven." He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home, and he said yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you, and you're to be a man, said the child, opening her eyes, and are never to come back here, but first we're to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in all the world. "You're quite a woman, little fan," exclaimed the boy. She clapped her hands and laughed, and tried to touch his head, but being too little, laughed again and stood on tiptoe to embrace him. Then she began to drag him in her childish eagerness towards the door, and he nothing loth to go to accompany her. A terrible voice in the hall cried, "Bring down Master Scrooge box there," and in the hall appeared the schoolmaster himself, who glared on Master Scrooge with a ferocious condescension, and threw him into a dreadful state of mind by shaking hands with him. He then conveyed him and his sister into the various old well of a shivering best parlour that ever was seen, where the maps upon the wall and the celestial and terrestrial globes in the windows were waxy with cold. Here he produced a decanter of curiously light wine and a mug of curiously heavy cake, and administered installments of those dainties to the young people, at the same time sending out a meagre servant to offer a glass of something to the postboy, who answered that he thanked the gentleman, but if it was the same tap as he had tasted before, he had rather not. Master Scrooge's trunk being by this time tied on to the top of the chaise, the children bade the schoolmaster goodbye right willingly, and getting into it, drove gaily down the garden sweep, the quick wheels dashing the hoar frost and snow from off the dark leaves of the evergreens like spray. "Always a delicate creature whom a breath might have withered," said the ghost, "but she had a large heart." "So she has," cried Scrooge. "You're right, I will not gainsay it. Spirit, God forbid." "She died a woman," said the ghost, "and had, as I think, children. One child," Scrooge returned. "True," said the ghost. "Your nephew was Christmas time again, but it was evening and the trees were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. "Know it," said Scrooge. "Was I apprentice here?" They went in. At sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind such a high desk that if he had been 2 inches taller he must have knocked his head against the ceiling, Scrooge cried in great excitement, "Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart, is Fezziwig alive again?" Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked upon at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed over himself from his shoes to his organ of benevolence, and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, "Yo-ho there, Ebenezer! Dick!" Scrooge, for himself, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice. "Dick Wilkins, to be sure," said Scrooge to the ghost. "Bless me, yes, there he is. He was very much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick, dear Dick. Dear, dear. Yo-ho, my boy," said Fezziwig. "No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up," cried old Fezziwig, with a sharp clap of his hands before a man could say Jack Robinson. You wouldn't believe how those two fellows run at it. They charge into the street with the shutters, 1, 2, 3, at 'em, up in their places, 4, 5, 6, barred 'em and pinned 'em, 7, 8, 9, and came back before you could have got to 12, panting like racehorses. "Hilly-ho!" cried old Fezziwig, skipping down from the high desk with wonderful agility. "Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilly-ho, Dick! Shitty up, Ebenezer! Clear away!" There was nothing they would have cleared away or could have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. In a minute every movable was packed off, as if it were dismissed from public life for evermore. The floor was swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile, and came 3 Miss Fezziwigs beaming and lovable, and came the 6 young followers whose heart they broke, and came all the young men and women employed in the business, and came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker, and came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman, and came the boy from over the way who was suspected of not having board enough from his master, trying to hide himself behind the girl from the next door, but one who was proved to have had her ears pulled by her mistress, and and they all came, and they all came one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling, and they all came anyhow and everyhow. Away they all went, 20 couple at once, hands half round and back again the other way, down the middle and up again, round and round, in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old Tom, a couple always turning up in the wrong place, new top couple starting off again as soon as they got there, old top couples at last, and not about one to help them. When this result was brought about, old Fezziwig, clapping his hands to stop the dance, cried out, "Well done!" and the fellow plunged his hot face into a pot of porter, especially provided for that purpose. For scorning rest upon his reappearance, he instantly began again, though there were no dancers yet, as if the other fellow had been carried home exhausted on a the sword